Heavyweight boxing fans, what's the deal? All right, so I'm back with my heavyweight classic fight review. All right, I'm gonna go year 2000. Lennox Lewis versus the up-and-coming contender, undefeated 6'7", 250-pound Michael Grant. Going into this fight, Lennox Lewis was still looked at as the man at heavyweight, although the WBA stripped him of that title because he would not face John Quiet Man Ruiz at the time. He elected to take on Michael Grant. Now, you go back in time, in hindsight, we can say that, well, hey, Ruiz had the better career than Michael Grant. But at that time in year 2000, Grant was undefeated. He looked the part. He had that slugfest with Galata where he went down, he persevered, he got up. You know what I mean? So people thought that, shit, well, you know, even though he's fighting Grant, Grant looked like he has more of a shot of beating Lennox Lewis than John Ruiz. All right, so Lennox still had the IBF and WBC strap. We know that he unified for Undisputed when he fought Holyfield. A lot of us thought he beat Holyfield the first time. Then the second time he got the decision. All right, so good fight. I'm going to review it. I'm going to come back after round one. You know, but before I get to that, man, I remember reading the Ring Magazine and Sports Illustrated. And I used to hate how they used to say that Lennox really didn't have any fans over here in America. That's bullshit, man. I really, you know, that's a lie. Now, when he was fighting guys like Holyfield and Mike Tyson, well, those are our guys over here. So, of course, there's going to be more cheering for those guys than Lennox. But we really did appreciate Lennox Lewis, man. I actually have a picture that my father took with Lennox. I showed it before on here. He took with Lennox in about 95, 96, somewhere in there. We always appreciated Lennox, man. I love this dude's style. He's one of my top 10 favorite heavyweights. I think he's a top 10 heavyweight of all time, but he's one of my favorite fighters growing up. But, you know, a lot of us Americans, we're big Holyfield Tyson fans. So, of course, when he fights those guys, we're not going to be rooting him on. But we always respected him, man. And we liked him even when he was fighting guys like Briggs and Galata and Tua and all the other guys. It's just when he went against Tyson Holyfield, we're going to support those guys. Those were our stars, you know what I mean? So, but Lennox Lewis, man. And then Lennox started to kind of adapt to our culture over here a little bit. In this fight and a few other of his fights where he started to wear the FUBU trunks, or he'll have FUBU across his trunks. And that kind of identified with the African-American fans. Not to say that we're the only group that he identified with, and not to say that every African-American wore FUBU. But I'm just saying around that time, late 90s, early 2000s, that was a part of the culture, you know, the hip-hop culture. And I used to see Lennox and rap videos. So he crossed over here, man. And he did have a lot of American fans. So it's just that when you read up, man, on old articles, they just make it seem like this dude didn't have any fans over here across the Atlantic. And that's not true. You know what I mean? But I'll be back after round one. Also, let me add, at the time of this fight, this was the record as far as weight, combined weight for the both champion and challenger for a heavyweight fight. The combined weight for both of these guys was 497 pounds, man. So it was two very big athletes in the ring on fight night. Grant was 250 pounds. Lewis was 247. Two big dudes, man. And even to this day, that's still two big dudes in there. Now there's a lot of heavyweights that are around this height and weight. So it's more on the, it's more like an average now, but that's still two big dudes in there, man. All right, so round one, very explosive. Michael Grant tries to come out and be very aggressive with Lennox Lewis. He was unloading with some right hands. He landed one. We landed a few on Lennox, but Lennox, man, he started to chop Grant up. He was waiting just to hurt Grant and then jump on top of him. He landed an uppercut that put Grant down. He gets up. He goes down again. Looked like the ropes kind of held him up on that second knockdown. Then the third knockdown, I'll always remember this, man, is George Foreman going, woo, when he landed that right hand. He almost broke his legs. I still remember that, man, 17 years later about this fight. But he goes down, Lennox threw a crashing right hand. He put Grant down. Grant gets up. He's wobbling all over the place. See, but the thing about this, when this was going on, I remember watching it like, man, let's see what he got. He did it against Galata. He went down against Galata in that fight in the first round, hurt just like this. Can he do it again? But the thing about Lennox Lewis, he's levels above Galata, man. And Doesn't seem like he's going to let Grant off the hook. Well, we know he's not going to let him off the hook, but you can just tell because Lennox, when he started hurting him, he started to be patient. And I seen a lead left that Lennox threw in there when Grant was coming forward. Grant's starting to reach on these right hands, man, to where he's throwing the right hand, then his whole body is falling into Lennox Lewis. He should have tried to, at least after the first knockdown, hold, get his bearings together, but Lennox was sneaking that uppercut on the inside when Grant would try to hold. And this shows, man, this shows that Grant, not a huge amateur background or anything like that, picked up boxing late. He was a natural athlete, played football, basketball, got a tryout from one of the Major League Baseball teams. I believe the Kansas City Royals, one of them teams. So natural athlete, but at the same time, still doesn't have the savviness about him at this point to know how to hold when he's hurt. Against Galata, he just fought back, and Galata was letting him off the hook, and he started to hurt Galata. But Lennox Lewis, whole different animal, man. Lennox started to be patient, use his jab, and now Lennox is pot shot with power shots. So definitely gave that first round of Lennox Lewis 10-7 after 3 knockdowns. All right, second round, they come out. Lennox Lewis being very aggressive. Obviously, after knocking Grant down 3 times, you expect him to come out, jump right on top of Grant. Grant is still trying to throw right hands, and he's falling in. But one thing I noticed when Lennox throws that jab, Grant's defense to that is literally just hold Lennox's left arm after he throws the jab. So you can tell Grant's still not all there, still not really steady on his feet right now. And Lennox is showing good defense also. When Grant is throwing these wild punches, he's ducking under him, and he's placing shots. Also, in that first round, after the, I forget which knockdown it was, but it was I said that Lennox landed an uppercut, then he landed a right hand after on one of the knockdowns in the first round. I forgot to mention, but yeah, so Lennox right now just trying to find that opening to stop Michael Grant. Another thing that I'm noticing is when they hold and clinch like this, Grant just did not know what to do on the inside. Lennox is picking up on this. Every time they hold, Grant really just wants to hold, and that's it. Lennox started to sneak in those uppercuts, and he's chipping away. Grant moving, trying to use his legs, get his, try to get his senses together. His mouth is open. He's tired. Lennox, he sees this. Down goes Grant from an uppercut. He couldn't make the count. He showed a lot of heart as far as trying to get up, man, but Lennox was just levels above him, man. One thing about Grant that I was noticing in his third round is when he was throwing his jab and his right hand, he will look the opposite way. So he'll throw the jab and then turn his head and look the opposite way, or he'll throw the right hand and look the opposite way. That right there lets me know that he's not really committing to the punch. He's throwing it. It's some leather, but he's not really fully committing to the punch, and he can't see where he can place another shot behind his right hand, maybe follow up with a left hook, or maybe throw the jab and then come back down the pike with a right hand and a left hook. Was never really putting himself in a position to throw combinations because he kept turning his head when he would throw his first punch. Worried about getting countered and getting punched at the same time. He fell into a clinch. Lennox landed an uppercut, got him out of there. Even earlier in the round, Lennox landed, or he threw a series of uppercuts, 4 or 5 uppercuts, a few of them landed. Lennox just wanted to be very aggressive in this fight, man. He didn't want to use his jab and, stretch the fight out and then turn it up later. He wanted to go right out. As soon as Michael Grant came to him aggressive, Lennox gave him the fight that he wanted. You know what I mean? That's one thing about Lennox, man. You come out aggressive on him, he'll give you the fight that you want. You know what I mean? So, classic fight, man. Classic, vintage Lennox the Lion Lewis. Y'all let me just think in the comment section. I'm out.